It's time to talk about the New York Knicks and their season. Michael Bolton, big Knicks guy?
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and we're going to go through this preview at a medium pace. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. Getting through these team review shows, this is the slot in terms of record order that is the Dallas Mavericks. But their season's not over. It almost was, but they have kept it alive, 3-1 down in the finals. I'm sure that, maybe that ends next game. I don't know, but that's where we're at the moment. Remember, live draft show, Wednesday, June 26th, 8 p.m. Eastern, live on YouTube. Come join me. We'll talk about the first round of the draft as it goes down, and you can actually hear, hopefully, some commentary that's a little bit better than what you get on the actual official broadcast. Apologies to those guys. Not really, because they need to do better work on it. All right. We're here to talk about the New York Knicks, a team whose season was interesting, impressive, annoying, hard to sort of judge, I guess, for a number of reasons. Big trades that enabled the roster to turn over a lot of different players. A team that at the end of the playoffs, people are talking about how great they were and how awesome they were. In the end, they were a 2 seed who lost in the second round to a 6 seed. I know there are a lot of reasons around that, but it's acting like this gigantic underdog team who came through and fought valiantly against the big bad teams, but they didn't. They lost to a 6 seed as a 2 seed in the second round. They are a team with still big question marks about how any of this stuff works, because the Knicks team that we saw at the end of the season is probably going to have no resemblance to what we see at the beginning of next season because of injuries and free agency. We'll try to work out as best we can here about how this makes sense or what it could make sense as, but there's a lot to talk about. Now, that sounds like I'm downplaying the Knicks or that I'm a hater. I probably am. I don't like when things get, I guess, misconstrued. Let's not misconstrue this, though. Those numbers are great. 50 and 32 is fantastic. A plus 4.9 net rating, I believe, is 5th best in the NBA. These are, again, awesome numbers. So you could suggest that 50 and 32, they actually they underperformed how good they were. They could have been better. They ended up with the 2 seed, despite the injuries. Some may say maybe losing your alleged All-NBA forward helps the team get better. Not a great spot to be in if that's the case, but maybe it did, maybe it didn't. 7th best offense and 10th best defense. When you look at the team, yes, you expect this team to be good on defense. Actually, you expect it to probably be better on defense with Tom Thibodeau coaching them, but that level of offense, really amazing stuff. Their preseason over-under was just 45.5 wins. I actually initially had them at 47. I dropped them down to 45, so I missed it in the end. And one of my concerns with the Knicks was, bro, what are you doing with your roster? There are a million guards and you have no forwards. And my big thing was, if Julius Randle goes down, you have no forwards. All right? And of course, a couple of people, it's fine, he doesn't get hurt. Okay, he did, obviously. And then they made a bunch of trades which actually hurt their depth even further. Barrett quickly out, OG in. That hurts your depth. And you had guards. And I was critical of some of their off-season moves. Not critical, it's good player. But where does Donte DiVincenzo fit? How does he get minutes? Where's the playing time? And then a million guys went down. The forwards went down. They played 4 guards at a time. So it is, again, really hard to see how we judge what this team is. Because so many of the different circumstances that occurred this season, it's just probably not going to happen in years to come. It probably isn't. They hold an interesting hand at the draft. They've got back-to-back picks, which is always a really interesting spot, 24 and 25. I doubt they hold both of those picks. They have been, in previous seasons with Leon Rose in charge, the absolute kings of trading back. So I would say there is zero chance that they come out of this draft with 24, 25, and 38. I would not be shocked to see 24 moved into like a future first or something. Or 24 moved into 28 plus pick 40 or something, or not 28, yeah, 28 and pick 40 or something like that. And then pick 40 and 38 get turned into pick 31 or something along those lines. Those three picks, I wouldn't be shocked if we end up with the Knicks having 25 and 30. Right? That would be, or even 25 and a future first or something. I would be shocked if they come out of the draft with those three picks making those selections. Their most common starting group, again, they did suffer a lot of injuries. A lot of teams did. We know this. And I'm not going to do the lazy thing and tell you that all of the Knicks injuries are because Tom Thibodeau plays these guys too many minutes. There is a part of that for sure. Right? There is a part of that without any question. But it's not all of the case. You could easily make an argument that Julius Randle hurting his shoulder has nothing to do with Tom Thibodeau's minutes. But there are other arguments to make that it is that the consistent big minutes every single game playing leads to muscle fatigue. That doesn't matter if it's the start of the game or the end of the game, that your balance is off and something happens, then injury occurs. Versus he played 40 minutes of the game and then something happened in that particular game. Fatigue and all that stuff is cumulative. And it's not just, you played so many minutes this game, you got tired and you got hurt. All that sort of stuff can impact your body, proprioception, all that sort of thing. It is undeniable that Tom Thibodeau plays his guys a ton of minutes. And then you can say, what else was he supposed to do? Look at the players he had. True. And that is part of the criticism I had of the Knicks in the preseason. It's like when your back end of your roster is 7 guys which are unplayable in the NBA, Charlie Brown, Mamadi Diakite, Ryan Archer-Jacquino, Daquan Jeffries, blokes that just can't play, then you actually lean into Thibodeau's worst tendencies and giving him the excuse to say, I've got to keep these guys on the court 25 points up with a minute left because I can't trust Charlie Brown. And I actually have sympathy for that because you can't. Sorry to Charlie Brown. So there's some issues with all that. Then everyone, there are numerous things. I would say the OG Anunoby injuries is a big part of the Thibodeau stuff. The Randle one, borderline. Mitchell Robinson, probably not, but also, did he come back too early? Because they applied for a disabled player exception, and that meant that he theoretically wasn't going to be available until June. Now, there was always weirdness around that. Obviously, came back before June, played in the playoffs, and then has to have ankle surgery. Just a lot of stuff happened. I'm not saying anyone's particularly to blame. There are multiple reasons behind this. Roster construction with a lack of depth. The coach is there. There are all these things. And again, a Thibodeau team losing in round 2, pretty common occurrence. Again, it doesn't take away from them being awesome. Their most common starters, Brunson, DiVincenzo, Hart, Achua, and Hartenstein. Only one of those players began this season as a starter, and that's Brunson. One of them, Achua, wasn't on the team. Hart was a bench player, DiVincenzo was a bench player, and Hartenstein was a bench player. Now, Hartenstein shouldn't have been a bench player. You know that I've advocated for him being better than Mitchell Robinson for years. The 2 years he's been on the team. But that was their most common starting group. What was their best group? At an astonishing plus 33.1 net rating, 98th percentile in the NBA. Brunson, Deuce McBride, Donte DiVincenzo, and Josh Hart. All guards. Although Josh Hart, honestly, I say Josh Hart's a guard. He's not. He played no guard minutes at all this season. All he played was forward minutes. He is a forward. He's the next guy that I'm going to reference in terms of the way that I referenced DeMar DeRozan, where sites keep listing him as a shooting guard when he hasn't played the position for 5 years. That is Josh Hart now. He is a forward only. He was their power forward in this best lineup, Josh Hart, and then Hartenstein was the center. So obviously they worked really well to get big production out of bench guys and fill-in players, and that was a great lineup. Great. Their free agency stuff is relatively interesting, I think. The restricted guys, Precious Achiuwa is the one that really is important, but it's not. But he is, compared to Jacob Toppin and Charlie Brown Jr. Achiuwa is still a guy that I think is very much not good. I think he improved quite a bit this season. I thought his defense was good at times, but we also saw that the minutes that he got were strictly because everyone was hurt. And as soon as players came back from injury, he got taken out of the rotation or playing 10 minutes a night. So we'll talk about Precious a little bit more later, but he is restricted. I don't see any level of future starter or future good player here at all. I think he's one of those guys that I just have completely opposite opinion to a large portion of people on Precious. Acknowledging that he did improve, still not very good. They're unrestricted free agents. This is where the big stuff comes in because it's all about Shake Milton. Did you even know Shake Milton was on this team? After I thought he could be all right in Minnesota, they cut him and he ended up here. Alec Burks is unrestricted too, but of course it is Isaiah Hartenstein, who, that I've talked about for a long time, and he is the absolute poster child for, hey, when someone's advanced stats, EPM, Darko, BPM, whatever it is, when they're consistently looking great every year in his backup role or whatever, maybe at some point should go, maybe he's good. He is that guy, because ever since, even coming out of, I think he came from the German league initially, and he came across to Houston, and then his numbers for the Rio Grande Valley Vipers were huge in the G League for Houston. In the Clippers, the same thing. Every time the advanced stuff, man, these are unbelievable. Can he play? Well, the answer is yes. Yes. Now, I'm sure that somebody watching this or listening to this will have an example of someone with these elite advanced statistics that, when given an opportunity in a bigger role, sucked. I can't actually think of it off the top of my head, but I'm sure it exists. But Hartenstein's that guy that I'm not sure who the actual corollary is that's not Hartenstein at the moment, with the guy that's always got the big advanced numbers but no role. But Hartenstein's the example at the moment of the guy that everyone's ignoring, and it just takes a chance to get there. Now the problem is because he's been underrated his whole career, and the contract that he signed was way too low with the Knicks. They don't have bird rights. They signed a 2-year deal. So they are early bird limited, meaning they can go, I think it's 170% of his last contract in year one, and then limited to 8% raises. So we can only get, it's about $14 million this season. The most they can go with him, I think, is 4 years, 76 or 75. So if any team comes in and says, here's $20 million a year, $25 million a year, it's the Knicks literally cannot pay it. Doesn't matter about tax or anything. They cannot pay that much. They are limited. They do not have the room that he is almost like a free agent that you need cap space for to sign. So they can't do that. So the chances of him returning, they've got to be borderline. And that changes everything on this team because he's awesome. Now, Hartenstein, if he went to another team, they paid him $25 million a year and he plays 28, 29 minutes a night, well, we are talking about a very comfortable top 100 player, probably top 70. And even this season, once Robinson went down, there were still people skeptical about Hartenstein. It's all about Jericho Sims. Hartenstein's trash, Josh. Why would you recommend him? This is why. So, he is unrestricted, but limited for the Knicks. Other teams can pay him more if they've got the cap space. A very intriguing situation. And then you've got the options, because OG Anunoby has an almost $20 million player option. He will undoubtedly decline that, and I would say sign a contract that everyone says is too much. It's probably going to be $30+ million a year. But I would be stunned if OG is not on this team. They've got team options on Jericho Sims and Daquan Jeffries. Zero reason to pick it up on Jeffries. Sims maybe, as a third, fourth string center, whatever. But I don't really see him developing into anything good. And then you've got a couple of, one other interesting one, because Bojan Bogdanovic's contract is non-guaranteed. He's owed $19 million this season, but it's not fully guaranteed. Now, he had that surgery in the playoffs, another injury, but also when we get to him later on, you'll see that he dropped off massively this season. Huge drop-off. Multiple injuries and just poor performance. The other one is Mamadi Diakite. Again, why are these guys on the roster? What the hell are they doing on the back end of the roster? Because they're actually unplayable. And I get it, Tom. I sympathize. They're bad. Then we turn into what happens in terms of expiring deals, because Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson could both be playing on the final year of their contract this coming season. Both of them have player options to opt out of. They could both get extensions, yes. Brunson's one in particular wouldn't pay him anywhere near what he can get on the open market, but they could both be unrestricted free agents. So there's a lot of decisions that need to be made with this New York Knickerbocker team. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're out hiring for your small business, well, you need to get the right people in for that job, because making a mistake with hiring in small business, it can be really costly. Staff are one of the more important things that you can get in terms of running things, and LinkedIn Jobs gives you the ability to find the qualified candidates faster. In fact, small business owners and hiring managers say that they find a qualified candidate on LinkedIn Jobs within 24 hours, 86% of the time. LinkedIn Jobs is not just another job board. It's LinkedIn. Access to over 1 billion professionals. And you can get your job out in front of those guys to make sure you get the right person in for your job. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, let's talk about the players. Let's talk about the starters on this team. Again, it is going to be difficult because of guys in, guys out. And let's talk Jalen Brunson, because in the end of the season, like, I'll admit this. There's no point in me not admitting it. I was much lower on Jalen Brunson. In fact, when I did my first All-Star team list at about the 8th of January, I didn't have him on the team. I thought there were some significant struggles for him early in the season. I thought people were overrating some of his performances. But once we actually got to the All-Star game, he had improved quite a bit from that early portion. He looked really good. And then as the season went on, he just carried this team hard. And it was him doing unbelievable stuff to get them to the 2 seed. Now, of course, he was another player that got injured in the playoffs with a broken hand. That's not going to impact his next season. But the question always has got to be, when we look at this for fantasy, like, he was 24th in -1. Yahoo had him 16th, 19th in points leagues. His ADP was 38, so he beat that. There was a lot of whispers about Brunson in this last offseason saying, hey, guys, he's actually improved. And I was skeptical. Like, what's he improving on? Well, he did improve a lot. 29 points, almost 7 assists. But part of the thing that's always, I think, going to hold him back is no defensive stats, 0.9 steals. Low rebounds, 3.6. He shot 40% from 3. That's true. 51.6 on 2s. But we also have to remember that half the season was without Julius Randle. And not that Randle is good. Well, I'll talk about that in a sec. Not that Randle is better than Brunson or anything like that. But if you compare, I've got the offensive load there, 99th percentile for Brunson this season. If you look at what that number was this season versus last season, massively different. Huge difference. Like 15, 16% higher this year because Randle wasn't there. So when we look at what Brunson had to do to carry, remember also Brunson sucked at the World Cup. He was really bad. And slow start to the year and then kicked it up. Did he kick it up because he was allowed to play in a more cohesive environment without Randle? Did he just have a cold streak and then had a hot streak? Is the hot streak real? Is the hot streak what he always is? There's a lot of unanswered questions. And all this to stay, like, awesome. He was great. I did have him 5th in my MVP in the end. I thought what he did in terms of being valuable and carrying this team as hard as he did was unbelievable. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you, yeah, like, he was 24th in -1 and 19th in points. He's a definite top 20 fantasy player. I can't be 100% certain on that. Because if 3-point shooting goes from 40 to 37, if usage drops 2 percentage points because Randle is back, then he sits at 30. And that's good, but it's worth remembering. His best comps were year 5 of Damian Lillard and year 5 of Isaiah Thomas. That is Celtics Isaiah Thomas. He's the 99th percentile on EPM, 96th on crafted, and 99th percentile offensive load. Huge numbers. He's 28. We're right at peak Brunson here. But the Randle thing cannot be ignored. And when I do the projections for him next season, how he comes out with an alleged full season of Brunson, or of Randle, but also like with a full season of Anunoby, with where do they fit Donte DiVincenzo? With all these question marks, I've got to see how it works. He's a great player, fantastic player. Second half of the season was one of the best 5 players in the NBA easily. But we still got to have a level of query on where it goes. Let's talk about the double royal, Julius Randle. He ended up 49th in -1 rankings. His ADP was 53, so somehow per game he beat that. He was 35th in points season. We know there's always a gigantic discrepancy between the category valuation of Randle and the points league valuation. Him 35th in points is actually a downgrade. He should normally be a top 25 player. He averaged 24 and 9 with 5 assists. He talked about Brunson having no defensive stats. Randle hates him. Half a steal, 0.3 blocks, 1.7 threes, below average percentages. Even though 47 and 78 are strong, they are below average, marginally below average. Very high turnovers. We know that also. 54 on his twos and 31 on his threes. This is hardly a player in the NBA who has a bigger fluctuations in three-point shooting numbers year on year than Randle. He could come out and shoot 40% next season. He could shoot 20. It's all within the realms of possibility. Again, the Yahoo 210th is because he played only 46 games and 35 minutes, but those Yahoo rankings hate what Randle does. So on per game, it probably has him at like 90th or 100th. But you've got to have a look, and I think a large part of head-to-head is what strengths does a player bring? It's about, a lot of it is accumulation. A lot of it is accumulation. The way that the game is set up is accumulation. Get more games in, get more players in, stream for more games. Beat them on a one-game-week basis. So those metrics don't reflect that well. That's why I do like the -1, where he comes in at 49th, which I think is fair. These two player comps, man, year 4 of Luis Scola and year 10 of Zach Randolph, which was the second year that Zach, I think, played in Memphis. That's because it's good rebounds, it's good scoring, it's horrific defensive numbers. The passing is definitely way better for Randle, but it's also some rough shooting. That's who he is. He was 86th percentile EPM, 82nd on crafted. His rim frequency is contesting shots at the rim, 10th percentile. Like, bro, you're a power forward. You've got to at least at some point contest a shot. And this is where you should have never any hope of any of his defensive stuff improving. So there's going to be a thing that happens here. Does Randle take a further step back from this to enable Brunson to stay at the level that he was once Randle went down? Or does Randle come back in, do Randle things, and Brunson steps back? We don't know the answer to that. He's 29, Julius. Like I said, it'll be a chance for him to be on an expiring contract. So we'll see how they treat it. Honestly, it is a big question mark, because his presence or absence or role changes a lot about this team. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It's the most fun and the most exciting way to get in on the action when you watch your favorite teams and sports and players as well. You pick more or less on at least two individual player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times back. With PrizePicks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports across the summer. Make a PrizePicks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You do 2 to 6 individual stat projections and bang, there you go. You are off and running. The NBA is almost done. That doesn't mean basketball stops though, because the WNBA is in full swing. We've also got PGA golf, NASCAR, baseball, all of these sports plus more you can find over at PrizePicks. They've also got esports now as well. Every Wednesday and Saturday, you try out esports, and if your lineup doesn't win, you get your entry fee back. You can choose from Counter-Strike 2, Call of Duty, League of Legends, and more. So, download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Download the app, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It is that easy. Okay, let's move on to the next player, and that is the big fella in the middle, Isaiah Hartenstein, who, finally we got to see a little bit of it here. Now, he only played 25 minutes a night. He battled in his first season in New York, the season before, an Achilles injury since the start of the year, and then his girlfriend complained about the Knicks not knowing how to use him, and then that injury was a real problem. And then this year, it cropped up again, and that's a worry. A 2-year run of having a bothersome Achilles is not ideal. He's 26, right? This is heading into the prime here for Hartenstein. He was 87th in -1, 56th on Yahoo in 25 minutes a night. His ADP in the preseason was nothing. He wasn't drafted, but if you look at their overall numbers, 7th percentile. 7% of the leagues he was drafted in. So all the leagues afterwards, everyone was picking him. He only averaged 8 points a game with 8 rebounds, 1.2 steals, 1.1 blocks, 64 and 71. And that's where it gets really interesting, because Isaiah Hartenstein did all of this in only 25 minutes in a Tom Thibodeau offense which hates centers. If he goes to another team and the Achilles is okay, and he plays 29 minutes a night, he won't have only 8 points a game. He won't have that low usage. He will put up numbers which, honestly, the absolute ceiling here for Hartenstein is top 30. You never draft him there. Do not do that. But if he's on another team and it looks like clear starter, he is a massive guy that we target late because the upside is through the roof. All of these things that he did are in 25 minutes playing for Tibbs. He shot 33% on threes, but he just barely hit any. He can do that a little bit, but that's not part of his game. It's high rebounds, it's good passing, it's great steals, it's great blocks, it's unbelievable efficiency. And even those free throws can be better. 65% on twos and 71 from the line. The comps for him. Year 4 of Joakim Noah. And then year 4 of Jakob Poeltl. A lot of soft J's in there. Hartenstein has got way more. I will not pick him in the top 50 because I worry a little bit about the Achilles. I worry about how they use minutes or whatever. But I feel like it's relatively established that he is better than Mitchell Robinson now. But that could also change like that. And it becomes a 24-24 minute split and Tibbs does weird stuff if Hartenstein returns. His value could be all over the shop. Now, as per usual, his advanced metrics were unbelievable. 97th percentile in EPM. 97th for Isaiah Hartenstein. He was that good. Now, of course, he couldn't be voted for most improved player, I think, because of these stupid rules. But these numbers are crazy. His EPM was 4.7 this season. Now, last year, it wasn't as good. He obviously battled a lot. He was down at negative 0.9, but for the Clippers, plus 3.4. They are two, top 7 percentile seasons he's had. High efficiency. I don't know. He's just good. I don't know what more to say about him. His offensive load, this is where it gets interesting. 29th percentile. His usage for the Clippers, 18%. His usage the year before when he was at Cleveland and Denver, 19%. His usage in year 2 in Houston, 15%. For the Knicks, 11 and 11. Push that to 17 and we are absolutely flying. More minutes, more usage, but it also could not happen. But he is a guy that I don't know if he's going to be a sleeper because I just don't know where he ends or where he gets drafted. But we talk about how do you get better? What can change? It's very, very obvious on him. Very. Let's talk about the big ragu, Donte DiVincenzo, because we can sit here and go, well, DiVincenzo had an ADP of 141. He was drafted in 6% of leagues. What a gigantic win. How did people miss on this? Well, very obviously, because at the start of the season, he didn't play. He played 20 minutes a night. Their team had Quickly there. It had Barrett there. It had Brunson there. It had Grimes there. It had Hart there. He didn't play. His ranking at 32 on Yahoo is insane. That's not accurate. Come on, bro. There's no way. He played 81 games. He played 29 minutes a game. But also, will he even get 29 minutes a game next season? I'm not sure. OG Anunoby barely played. Randle barely played, meaning that Hart and DiVincenzo played the 3 and the 4 a lot. But if they play, where are the minutes? Now, I feel pretty confident that he'll be the starter, but is that 27 minutes? Is it 32? Because obviously the 29 takes into consideration the first 30-odd games of the year when he played 20 minutes a night. What's real here? 15 points, 3.5 triples. He shot 40% on 3. Really good shooter. 3.7 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 1.3 steals. And again, you look at those numbers and you go 79th in -1. Yep. 115 points. Okay. 32nd on Yahoo. Lol. But what's actually good here? 15.5 points, below average. 3.5 threes, above average. 3.7 rebounds, below average. 2.7 assists, below average. 1.3 steals, above average. 0.4 blocks, below. 44 from the field, well below. 75 from the line, well below. So it's real, it is being heavily carried by the 3-pointers with some okay rebounds, some okay assists, pretty good steals, which are always variable. And he shot 40%. I think he is a really good shooter. I think 40% is realistic. I think that he could be a player that plays 34 minutes a night and gets more usage. But on this team, how realistic is that? I'm not sure it is. His best comps, year 6 Kerry Kittles and year 6 for coaching legend Byron Scott. He was 83rd percentile EPM, 88th in CPM. His deflections were 95th percentile too, which is a great way of being able to look at some, because steals can fluctuate quite a bit, but deflections tend to be a little more stable. So that gives us a level of confidence in some of the defensive stuff. But still, he is one of those guys. I know there's no massive comparison, but Gary Trent. Threes and steals. The minutes fluctuated a lot for Gaz. DiVincenzo is a way better player and has way more security. But again, when we look at this team and how it all plays out, 26-minute-a-night player? 32? Not sure. It's very much up in the air. Love what he did. Also, 81 games, so people go, look, he's never missed games. Yeah, bro's missed 1 million games in other years in his career. Persistent ankle problems, hamstring injuries, I think it was. He's missed a lot of games. Stayed healthy. Doesn't mean shit moving forward. Loved him. He was great. The season that he had overall does not reflect the reality of what the situation was. Nor does it reflect the reality for OG Anunoby. Because we talk about Randle missing all this time. Fair enough, we do. We did talk about it. Because OG played 50 games. He played 34 minutes a night. He's 27. Now, this was probably one of his worst seasons. His ADP was 51. He ended up ranked 98th in -1 and 144th on Yahoo with 112th in points leagues. They are clearly not ideal numbers. He struggled mightily in Toronto. He's one of the... We thought that there'd be more for Siakam, more for Barnes, more for Anunoby with Van Vliet leaving. That did not happen at all for Anunoby. He just wasn't great. He went to New York and things changed a little bit. Let's run through the numbers. 15 points with 2 threes, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.4 steals and 0.7 blocks on 49 and 75. Shot 38 on threes and 58 on twos. That's all okay. But it's definitely not the best that he's ever been. And then injuries. The elbow injury. Had surgery, came back, got hurt again. Had a hamstring injury. Got hurt, came back too early. Like just consistent stuff. I hate the talk of, there's whispers that OG's soft. He doesn't want to play through pain. That stuff is ridiculous to me. Like speculating on a man's like mental capacity to do that. It feels gross to me. I'm not going to do that. I know he's gotten injured, but it doesn't mean that he's going to get injured. His best comps were Blue Edwards in year 3. Blue Edwards, yeah. And Chris Morris in year 5. You'll notice with a lot of these Knicks players that a lot of the player comparisons are these old school 80s guys because of the Thibodeau system, I think. He was 93rd percentile EPM, 91st in crafted, and his regularized adjusted defensive turnover number, 99th percentile. He's awesome at generating defensive events. We know this. That's always who he's been. He's 27, 34 minutes a night. Now, when he moved from Toronto to New York, his minutes went up, but his usage went down. He went from 18 to 17. Not a big difference, but it went down. His efficiency actually went down as well. 58 effective field goal to 56.8. His mid-range shooting went from 45 to 36, which he'd never been over 40% from mid-range in his career. So that 36 in New York probably makes more sense. His rim numbers, which were way up in Toronto, 68%, went down to 62. And his previous seasons were 61, 61, 63. So when we look at the numbers, the New York numbers are probably more realistic. His assist rate, which is at 8.4% for the season, Anunoby, was 10.7 in Toronto, 5.8 in New York. One thing that did happen, though, his steal rate went back to career norms. So we can actually expect maybe some more improvement in steals, even though that fluctuates a lot. He led the league in steals the year before, and with 1.4 this year. But in large part because when he was in Toronto, those numbers disappeared. His block numbers also soared in New York. He did a lot more defensively with worse offense. And I think that's a relatively reasonable expectation. He's not going to go anywhere near the 50s. 70 to 80 is probably going to be a fine area, I reckon, for OG, but the minutes load could be a problem. When does he touch the ball offensively? Could be a problem. And then you got to hope that some of the defensive numbers come back up. The last player I'm going to discuss here as a starter is Josh the Hitman Hart. But again, he wasn't. He wasn't a starter. A lot of players got hurt and got injured. I would guess that their starting group, let's say that Hartenstein comes back, but even if he doesn't, whatever. It's Brunson, DiVincenzo, Anunoby, Randle, center. Whether that's Hartenstein, Robinson, or whatever. That's their starting group, meaning Josh Hart does not start. Because Josh Hart won't play the 2. OG won't play the 2. Josh Hart will not start. So Hart played 33 minutes a night. He's 29 years of age. He played 81 games. He was 113th in -1, 77th on Yahoo, ADP of 125. He was awesome down the stretch. Again, Much like Donte, it's easy to look at this and go, what a huge win. How do people let him slide? Huge sleep. I'll draft him again. If you are looking at him as any sort of top 100 guy, I can't do that. I can't look at him and say, well, there are 33 minutes a night here for him. Yes, he was playing 48 minutes a night all through the playoffs because everybody was out. He is going to be a sixth man until someone gets hurt. I don't really think there's any debate about that. 9 points with 8 rebounds. And this is what he is. An elite out-of-position rebounder. 4 assists was huge too. That's one of the more interesting things, is that he became a facilitator. That's encouraging. 0.9 steals and 0.3 blocks are putrid, obviously. As with nearly all of the Knicks guys, bad at percentages. 43 from the field, 79 from the lines are pretty good. He shot 31 on his threes and 51 on his twos. It's great rebounds. It's nice assists. And that's his numbers. His comps were Kenrich Williams, year 4. Now, Kenrich Williams has been one of those guys who's always been an impactful guy in low minutes who does the things that are needed to win. And that's what Hart had been a lot of times in his career. But Hart did ramp it up. And I love his scalability is awesome. But it's also worth remembering. I know he's 77th ranked here on Yahoo. I would not touch Josh Hart, who gets so much cred. I get it. I understand why. But everyone loves Josh Hart. And he is a prime candidate to be overdrafted. Massive candidate. 64th percentile only on EPM. That's a weirdly low number. Crafted had him at 87th, and his defensive rebounding quality 80th percentile, which is true. Like, he's an awesome rebounder. We know this. But what else is good? Rebounds, assists, both good. Anything else? No, everything else is not good. And that is not a player I'm taking my first 6 or 7 picks. So much of the value here came from all of the absences that boosted his second half numbers through the roof. Let's talk bench players. Some other players of note. I don't think we're going to spend a huge amount of time, but let's talk Precious Achiuwa. Because again, he's one of those players that for some reason people love. I don't really get it. He was 200th in -1 rankings, 173rd on Yahoo. Even before the season, he was drafted in 3% of leagues at 142. Why? That was when he was a backup in Toronto. Why? He's 24, going to be 25 at the end of next season, or middle of next season. He played 22 minutes a night. He started games at power forward. He was a solid enough backup, but he is horrendous offensively. I can't stress enough how bad offensively this guy is. He thinks he's like a number 1 option on the wing when he's a backup center who shouldn't do anything. He should be on the Tom Thibodeau diet of centers don't do anything. 7.6 points with 7 rebounds in 22 minutes. That's all right. 1.3 assists, 0.6 steals, 0.9 blocks. Good block numbers. Yeah, we do the 50% rule for him, 22 minutes up to 33 minutes. Yeah, 1.3 blocks, 0.9 steals, 10 points, 9 rebounds, 10 rebounds. Fine. 50% from the field as a center is pretty bad. 62 from the line is bad. 27 from 3 is bad. His best comps were Tony Batty, year 3, and Corey Jefferson, year 1. 50th percentile EPM, 42nd in CPM. What I do like about what Precious does, he contests shots. 89th percentile contesting shots at the rim. That's huge. He's quite good at that. And he did improve quite a bit there. My problem is he takes a lot off the table offensively, and we've seen it with multiple coaches. He was out of the rotation in Toronto. And he pushed back in the last couple of games before trade, but he was out of the rotation. Under Nick Nurse, he didn't play much. And then when Thibodeau got guys healthy, he was back playing 12 minutes as a reserve. He is not a power forward. He is a backup center that people love for I don't know what reason. Maybe he improves. Maybe. We're 4 years in though, and it's the same problems all the time. I'm just not interested in him. I just don't think he's good. I need to see way more. I will admit that he has changed and he's improved defensively. He's pretty good defensively in a role. But that's it. It's a role. And I don't think we get more out of it. Let's talk Bojan. Bojan Bogdanovic played a huge role in the previous season in Detroit, but as always, context is required because Cade was out. He became the number 1 guy. Usage went through the roof, and that was never going to happen this season. He was picked at 120. Now, I drafted him in, I think, 1 league at like 135. Sat him on my IR with my last pick, and that was all right. Right, but people had some crazy expectations. He's 35. He played 26 minutes a night, 57 games, 15 points with 2 threes. But this is the problem, is that unless he's playing 30-plus minutes, unless he's getting 27 high usage, there's no way you want this in fantasy. None. 15 points, 2 rebounds, 2.7 rebounds, 1.7 assists, half a steal. He shot 45 from the field, which included 40% from 3. And then only 79 from the line. Defense is terrible. His passing is non-existent. I think he's done. I think he's done as any sort of fantasy option for us. His best comps were year 12 of Eddie Johnson and year 12 of Dale Ellis. 29th percentile on EPM and 2nd percentile on crafted. That's disgusting. His three-point attempt rate was only 65th percentile. So that is where he can improve. He needs to sort of change that game somewhat, because again, we think of him as a just high-volume Sam Merrill, Sam Hauser three-point shooter. He's not. 65th percentile three-point attempts is okay, but he was doing a lot of high-usage stuff in Detroit as a number one sort of a player. And he's not that anymore at all. So that could go up, and maybe he hits 3 threes a game. But there's literally nothing else there for Bogdanovic. And at this age, yeah, we're not expecting much. And yeah, multiple injuries this season too. What about Mitch Robinson? Did he take it from here? Absolutely not. He had multiple ankle injuries again, came back and got hurt in the playoffs, and was supplanted by Hartenstein. Now, it is possible that Hartenstein returns and Robinson starts over him, but it would be absolutely ludicrous for anyone to suggest that Mitch Rob is a 30-minute-a-night player anymore. He's only 26. He played 31 games and 25 minutes. That was 154th in -1. He was drafted at 99, which is pretty high. Points leagues, he's useless. I would say he's undraftable for fantasy if Hartenstein does return. I don't see why you would do it. 5.6 points, 8.5 rebounds, 1.2 steals, and 1.1 blocks. And for a guy that used to have a ton of foul trouble, he's reduced that foul trouble, and it also means that he doesn't block shots anymore at a high level. He shot 41% from the line, which is one of the worst in the entire league. And even that high field goal percentage, which used to sit at times at 70, down to 58. That's where all the value's gone now. It's disappeared. You can't go... He's the stereotypical 3-cat player. And when one of those disappears, well, yeah, you're cooked. His rim finishing numbers 2 years ago were 77%, down to 68 last season. 68 last season. And then, and then 59 this previous year. That's a crazy drop. Do I think that he is a 29th percentile rim finisher, Mitch Robinson? No. But 2 years ago, sitting at 77, absolute peak, not what we expect, not what we think is going to hold. Also, we talk about his free throws. He has not shot 50% from the line for 4 years. That's who he is as well. His best comps were year 3 of Ben Wallace. That was when Ben Wallace was in Washington. And year 4 of Chris Dudley. 77th percentile EPM, 85th on crafted. Still an impactful player, still pretty good defensively, but the value of him has changed a lot. What I find interesting here is, again, to stay out of foul trouble, 71st percentile in contesting shots at the rim. When that's the thing that you do, he's a really good rebounder, yes. But the thing that you do is defend and block shots. You've got to defend more shots than that. And the trade-off of the foul trouble has obviously hurt. Now, if he is an 18-minute-a-night backup and Hartenstein's the starter, then maybe he doesn't worry about the fouls as much and he just goes ham and contests 99% of shots and blocks 2 shots in 19 minutes. That is distinctly possible as well. But I just can't see how he's a draftable guy. I've got one more player to go. A player that when he came out of West Virginia, the fantasy translations for Deuce McBride were awesome. I was a little surprised that he fell back down to the second round and then he moved to a Knicks team where you don't get to play. And then everyone got hurt and he got to play and he was really good. I thought he was super impressive. A player that, again, you just sort of have the name on your radar about that guy that, well, just wait, let's see what happens. The fantasy numbers aren't ideal, like 274th in 20 minutes, 195 on Yahoo. But he did average 8 points in 20 minutes, 1.7 assists, 1.6 threes, 0.7 steals, 45 and 86 as he's shooting. He shot 41% on threes. And what's really interesting to me is that the similarity names that it spits out for Juice. Because the idea you should have of Deuce McBride is a tenacious defender who's sort of a point guard who has worked on his shot to become solid. But the two comparisons were Landry Shamet, one of the worst defenders in the NBA in year 4, and Christian James McCollum in year 2, a offense-only point guard, because Deuce McBride's numbers defensively, they fell a lot. He went from 63rd percentile on EPM to 56th. Big drop. Offensively, improved a ton though. True shooting went from 47 to 59. Rim numbers went from 53 to 61. Three-pointers went from 29 to 41. Free throws went from 68 to 86. But steal numbers went from 2.4% to 1.9%. Assist rate stayed the same. Block numbers went from 1% to 0.5%. All the defensive stuff, which was part of his game, just disappeared. And he played, and this sounds blasphemous, but he played like a Jalen Brunson role. No defense, a lot more offense. So what is he now? Is he just groomed to be a Jalen Brunson replacement and the defense is pushed to the side? What next step has he got? Now, he's really young. He's the youngest player we talked about. He was 23. He played 20 minutes a night, and he probably should be in the rotation. But you've got Brunson, you've got DiVincenzo, you've got Hart. Who's someone else you're missing? You've got this Anunoby. Like, where does Juice fit? He's not getting 20 a night. But we watched to see where this develops, because it was a massive switch from a defense-only player to an offense, or not offensive only, but sort of. Massive switch. Impressed with him, and we saw that he could play big minutes when the opportunity was there, and he would accumulate. But a lot of his big games came because he played 43 minutes, 45 minutes, 47 minutes, and that's nowhere near realistic for anybody. So as much as I liked it, it was a weird switch in the valuation or the type of player that he was. And that brings us to the end of talking about the New York Knicks and their season. I'm not going into Alec Burks or into Shake Milton or anyone like that, but they're a team, again, that it is almost, it's not impossible because we can do things with it, but it's almost impossible to fully grade what the team was because of the injuries, because of the Randle scenario, because of the Hartenstein uncertainty moving forward, because of like OG's health, that a million different things can happen. We always want to watch because we know that it's a tight rotation, so if somebody moves into a role, their minutes are going to be usable. But what do we do with Hart and DiVincenzo and McBride? And where does Brunson sit? And what does Hartenstein do? Where's Robinson fit? A million questions sit here for this team. But the only question I have for you is, have you got a thumb, and can you give me one of them? Subscribe as well. Leave your comments. Guys, we're done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.